This is really our first speaker event for Forward Tampa Bay. Maybe a year and a half ago, I started lamenting the fact that no one really cares about their local communities. You go back a couple hundred years and no one knew what was going on across the world. They only knew what was going on in their backyard. Fast forward to today, people talk more about a war in Ukraine or a senator's race in California more than they know the names of their county commissioners, their city council, or what the city of Tampa actually does. What really drives it home for me is when you start to see how many people show up for the elections. When 13% of registered voters in Hillsborough County show up for an election, things are broken. And kind of sit there and think, like, someone should do something about that. Something needs to happen about that. How do you get involved? And through conversations with Tony DeSisto and Tyler Cathy, two of my partners, we really decided to do something about that. So we formed Forward Tampa Bay. It has 4 critical missions. Number 1 is educate. Right? Abortion, gun control, immigration, none of that is the business of the city of Tampa. Has nothing to do with it, doesn't belong in the room. So on the back, you'll see a scope of issues and the pillars of the organization. The scope of issues, those are the things that we're here to talk about. Those are the things that are the business of the city of Tampa, the local governments, things like arts and parks and pipes and services. That's the type of things that we need to focus on. So educating, right? Bringing people together, educating them on what that is, various details of it, starting with the city budget, right? I don't even know what's in the city budget. I'm excited to learn. And you start getting into other aspects of, what are the major issues in transportation? What are the major issues in services? We'll get a lot of good speakers going forward. The second piece is connectivity. That was really started, I went to luncheons that Blake Casper used to put on. He'd bring people together. There'd be speakers on various topics, but it had no real purpose. For me, lots of friends in the room. It's great to have everybody together. Would love to spend lots of time with you, but we're all busy people. So hopefully by putting on something where you can show up, it's not offensive, serve you guys a great lunch, put on some fantastic speakers and content, you'll want to come. We'll have a reason to see each other every month, and it's about the future of Tampa. That's the purpose. 2B on the connectivity is really engaging with the community. So our data and research team over at Franklin Street has been going through the public records, trying to understand where the voters are, who are the associations that represent those voters, and then we're going to start an outreach program to do the same type of concept of education, right? It's not just us in this room and business leaders that need to be know what's going on in the city of Tampa, it's our entire voting community. So bringing in that outreach. The third part is candidate encouragement. And let me be clear, it's not endorsement. I have no intention of ever backing a candidate. That is not the purpose here. Now, it may be that you see someone here, you like them, and outside of the room, you may want to support them. But the purpose here is to encourage some great public civil servants to come into the fold. We want subject matter experts through the education, through the connectivity, for people to sit there and think, you know what, I might be interested in doing this, and we want to make it easy for them. We want to give them a platform to speak. We want to give them the packet of information they need to fill out. We want to make it easy so that as we have people with that enthusiasm, subject matter expertise, and care, that we get them to where they need to be. And then last but not least, we're going to do all this great stuff, but we need to communicate it. Marketing is important in all things, including good causes. And I kind of grew up Catholic, so guilt was something that was kind of brought on me early on in my life. And I think when you start telling people 13% of the population votes, and the laissez-faire attitude we have in our civil communities, like Tampa Bay is we're working on changing that. So get involved, right? It's not that hard. It's show up to a lunch. It's tell somebody about it. It's showing up to elections. It's being knowledgeable about the issues. It's being a good public participant. So with that, no one came here to see me speak today, but I do appreciate you all coming. It means it's important to you. And again, we're going to get going. For our first event, to me, where you spend money is what your priority is as a municipality. And not knowing a whole lot about the budget, figured the best person to do that for us would be our fantastic former mayor, the Honorable Bob Buckhorn, coming to give us an overview. So I think it's perfect, given my time here, watching what you were able to do with your leadership, that you're our first speaker for our group. I know we're going to have many after, but probably not many as good, right? So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob. Appreciate you guys being here.
Andrew, thanks. First of all, Andrew, thank you, and to all the folks that have put this together. This is a pivotal time for our community. I think we all know it. I think we have seen how far this city has come and what we are poised to do. from a place where not that long ago we were a donor city to places like Charlotte and to Austin, of our kids. Our best and brightest talent that was here was leaving this community to go someplace else because they weren't afforded the opportunities that they now experience and have the opportunity to do. So that transformation over the last decade, thanks to all of you, was nothing more than miraculous. And we have gone from a third-tier economy to the place in America where everybody wants to be. And we've all benefited from that. There is a swagger about this community. There's a sense of optimism. There's a sense of hope that perhaps didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. But we plowed through that recession. We believed in each other. We worked together. We didn't care who was a Democrat or who was a Republican. We believed in each other as a community, regardless of the God you worship, who you love, black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight, it didn't matter. And this place has moved light years ahead of where we are now, of where we once were, in spite of how bad that recession was. And I can tell you that it was bad. Certainly on the public side, all that you see in this community that has occurred was literally done with no money. We did not get back to 2007 property tax revenue numbers until my last year in office in 2019. It took us that long to get back to where we were in 2007 in terms of the revenue that we were generating from property tax, because as we all know, property values plummeted. All of us as homeowners enjoyed that benefit. But as you also know, we can only claw back 3% per year because of Save Our Homes. So when it plummets that far, it takes you a decade at least to get back to what those revenues numbers were in 2007. So all that you see in this community that has occurred has largely been put together with duct tape, spit, and private sector investment. And so now we find ourselves in a place where we always aspired to be. But I can tell you that can change pretty quickly, depending on the leadership and who we elect. This is a strong mayor form of government. It is one of the strongest mayor forms of government in the country. The power vested in that office by the charter is almost absolute. It's been in effect for 40 years, going back to the days of Bob Martinez. We have been lucky that we have had a succession of good mayors that were the right people at the right time for our community. But the power in that office is pretty powerful. It is the reason that we as a community have been able to succeed is because we had leadership vested in the mayor. Now you can disagree with the mayor, whoever the mayor is, and then you can vote them out every 4 years. But you need somebody, unlike other forms of government where you have a county administrator or where you have a city manager form of government, that there is in that one person, in that office, the ability to shape an agenda, to drive a narrative, to move a community faster than most other forms of government. It is critical to our success as a city is to maintain that strong mayor form of government. Any attempt to weaken it and to claw away at some of those powers and to give them to the legislative branch, in this case the city council, all of you should be standing up and saying, hell no. This form of government works. It separates us from our peers. It allows us to do things that other governments can't do. So it's important that we, in the context of this discussion, we remember that our form of government in the city of Tampa is unique. It needs to remain unique, and anybody who would do anything to deter that should not be looked kindly upon. And there have been efforts over the last 4 years to do that, because the legislative branch and some on the city council can't seem to get along with the mayor. Some of them wake up every day and see a mayor in the mirror. Some of them think they should be running the show, not the mayor. And so you end up with what we have seen over the last 4 years, which is a constant battle, which does not inure to the benefit of us and detracts us from moving the ball forward, which is what we all need to be focused on. What I'm going to show you is not a reflection on any particular mayor. I want that to be clear. I'm using numbers from the 2023 budget, which was last fiscal year, not this year's because it was just passed, and we all witnessed what has been occurring over the last couple weeks. Some of the numbers go back to when I was the mayor, but they are only for illustration purposes. So this is just going to give you sort of a primer on how city government budgets and some of the things that we are responsible for. All right, we have two basic pots of money in the city of Tampa. You have the general fund dollars here, and you have the enterprise fund, which is this right here. Enterprise fund is largely departments that should be running like you all run your businesses. There are rates associated with it. It's water, sewer, parking, and any of the utilities. They charge rates for the services that they provide. They're expected to run in the black. They are separate pots of money than general revenue dollars, which is the things that are non-revenue producing. The utility departments, enterprise funds, it's a larger pot of the money, portion of the money than general revenue dollars. But these are the two pots of money that make up the bulk of the city budgets. Some of these other things, debt service, capital project funds, are much smaller parts, but we're mainly going to talk about this. Specifically this, that's where a mayor or a city council has a lot more flexibility. These are relatively restricted to the departments that provide those services. You get a bill from the water department, you get a bill from stormwater, you get a bill from parking. It's all contained in here. There's not much flexibility to move it around, and you can't move it from one to the other. These are from the 2023 budget. Again, the two separate funds, enterprise, general revenue funds. These are the things that general revenue pays for. Basically, central government, technology and innovation, the convention center, parks and recreation, fire, and police. Now, see these two, fire and police right here? Of the general revenue fund, up until recently, all of the property tax revenue that we would raise every year did not even cover the cost of running the police and fire department. Public safety is expensive. It's largely personnel driven. Personnel costs, and you're going to see this later on in city government, is what drives the cost of our budgets. People cost money. These two departments, police and fire, and obviously these should be the top priority for any local government, is to keep us safe. You can't have prosperity without public safety. So without those two departments, you're looking at about 700 firefighters and about 1,100 uniformed police officers. So they will gobble up the vast majority of what you pay in property tax. For those of us who live in South Tampa who complain about how much we pay in property tax, what we all pay collectively in the city doesn't even cover the cost of those two departments, let alone all these other things. Parks and Recreation, Convention Center, central government. These two are the two biggest numbers. Over here, enterprise funds, we're going to spend less time talking about these because we have less control and less flexibility there. Water, wastewater, parking. We own 3 golf courses that the Sports Authority runs, and then solid waste, which is the trash pickup. Here we are with police and fire numbers. These are the net for the cost of running those two departments. When you separate out the CRA dollars, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you can see how much of the general revenue budget that they gobble up. So once you separate those two departments, you don't have a lot of flexibility and you don't have a lot of money to do a lot of other things. These are general fund expenses. This is a chart that takes us back to 2017. I left here in 2019. You can see how expenses have risen to where we find ourselves today. Now, there are reasons for that. Some good, some perhaps questionable. This is something you should be proud of. In spite of the fact that we were in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression, in spite of the fact that we literally had virtually no money, when the Wall Street rating agencies, which is like your credit score, but for municipalities, came in and looked at what we were doing that period of time, and I'm just going to talk about 2011 to 2019 when I was there. In spite of all of those things and how desperate it was, City of Tampa received 14 credit upgrades to our bond rates in that 8-year period, in spite of the fact that we were in the worst recession since the Great Depression. So all of the things that we did during that 8-year period to manage this budget and to reduce the number of employees and reduce expenses and downsize and right-size city government results in higher bond ratings, which means when we go to the public municipal markets to borrow money for big projects, just like your credit scores, we get it at a much lower rate, which saves all of us a lot of money. I would venture to say there's not a city in the country during those 8-year period that got 14 rating increases from the Wall Street rating agencies like the City of Tampa did. It is something that all of us should be proud of. Your City of Tampa has been, continues to be a very well-run, responsible, conservative government. This is the debt service that you see over long term. When we issue long-term debt, it's for big projects. The wastewater treatment expansion, the water treatment facility expansion, building a convention center, building a performing arts center. You have to issue 30-year debt in order to do that. You can't do it as pay as you go. And so when we issue that debt, the fact that we have those great credit ratings means we get this money a lot cheaper than other cities do. This is what our debt picture looks like at the current moment. So as you can see, we have a declining amount of debt, which is a good thing. That frees up more money for us to be able to spend on other things. But there will be other projects in here that will be financed with municipal debt that will cause that to spike up a little bit. But this is a good trend for the city moving forward. And again, this is a similar chart with outstanding debt service by bond year moving out. And again, when you float these bonds, they're 30-year bonds. Fund balance, also something that you should be proud of. This goes back to 2016. This is last year's budget. One of the reasons we get great ratings from the Wall Street agencies is because we have, at a minimum, we've always tried to keep it at a 20% reserves set aside for rainy days or hurricanes, which is the equivalent of Florida rainy days. The rating agencies look at this and recognize that we are well prepared in the event there's any catastrophic events in the city of Tampa, that we have enough resources to be able to manage that. This year's budget, City Council rated this for a $5 million hit, which is not smart, but we will still remain at the 20% mark. We were currently at, I think, about 24. That $5 million that they took out in this year's budget will drop us down to about 22. To the extent possible, you don't want to touch this. This is the money that you set aside for the hole in your roof. These are the kinds of things that cities have to have, and it has to be a big number given the magnitude of what we were dealing with. If we get hit with a hurricane, in the short term, we would have to use this money to get the city back up running and repair things. That's a good number to have for a city, and we should be proud of it. Personnel. People cost money, particularly in municipal government, because you're not just talking about what you pay them in their salaries. You're talking about healthcare costs. You're talking about pension costs. You're talking about all the ancillary costs that come with employees. We are self-insured. So when insurance costs go up or healthcare costs go up, which we'll talk about shortly, that reflects directly on our ability to fund this. Over time, and this goes back to Mayor Iorio all the way forward to Mayor Castor. When the Great Recession hit, Mayor Iorio eliminated about 700 city employees. That's a big number. That's a big number. The employee count at the time was about 5,000. She eliminated 700 city employees because we had to. I mean, we didn't have the money. During my time, you guys may find this hard to believe, I knew that it was personnel costs that would drive our budget significantly higher. I approved, and Christina will tell me, who was there with me the whole time, I approved personally every request for a new employee and every travel request. Personally. With 4,500 employees, I made every one of those department heads come to me and justify the need to hire more people, because more people will bust your budget in local government. I'm telling you. And those travel requests, you know, during the recession, it was like, you're not going anywhere. We can't afford to send you there. There's no reason you need to go there. I don't need 5 of you to go there. I need 1 of you to go there. And so literally every one of those requests was either approved or denied by me personally. And so we kept our personnel count low. I think during the course of my 8 years, we may have hired a total of 100 plus people over 8 years. Most of those were to staff Julian B. Lane Park, the new park that we built. Obviously, you can't build new stuff without having people to run it. But we really focused on keeping that employee count low for the obvious reasons. So you can see this is a good number. Tampa's blue. And as a percentage of population, we are far below where most of our peer cities in the state are. This is a chart that again shows you budget projects from 2017 to 2024, obviously increasing. This is where potentially it's going to be problematic. This is 2017. This is number of personnel, 4,500, up to where we are right about now, which is about 4,900 personnel. Yeah.
Is there a reason why?
You know,
Expectation?
some of it is, I think there was a feeling that we had ratcheted down so hard during the recession that there was a need to add bodies. Now, there are some places where bodies make sense. Permitting, the ability to move those permit applications through the system, construction services, inspectors, things like that, that actually end up generating revenue for you. Because if you guys are out building things and throwing up buildings and hiring people, we're going to generate more in property tax, and that will inure to the good of our budget. So there are places where hiring personnel is absolutely appropriate, necessary, and should be done. We've got issues with our permitting process right now that need to be resolved. But those kinds of hires and those kinds of people eventually inure to the benefit of the industry, which produces more, which generates more property tax, which ends up to our good on the bottom line. But there has been a significant bump in personnel at the city, and there are some significant costs associated with that. Yes, sir.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, Casey.
where do you feel like the resistance on outsourcing is then? Because there seems to be heavy resistance to privatized reviews and inspections. So in the areas that we're talking about, we need to add people, there's probably smarter ways to do it, right?
There probably are. I think some of it is government is unwilling to absorb the risk of having private sector folks do permitting because it's a public safety issue. And they don't want to let go of that. They want to make sure that they're the ones signing off on it and that all of you guys in the private sector are doing it right. Other cities have used private companies to do that. It works fine. So there are ways to do that where, you know, particularly for folks with professional licenses, there are other boards that govern their behavior, whether it's an architect or whomever, a contractor's license. So you're not going to risk your livelihood by doing something shady on a permit that would cause problems. So there's a happy middle in there, Casey. I just don't think it's being looked at.
Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Quick question
Yes,
about
Scott.
long-term debt.
Yeah.
What is allowed under long-term debt? Example, right? You know, the mayor talked a lot about conditions of the roads and bridges, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big line item, I would imagine, right? How's that funded? Can that be funded under long-term debt?
It can. Yeah, it can. You have to have a revenue stream to back that debt. So if you go to the bond market, they're going to say, okay, how are you going to pay this 30-year note? And so you have to have a consistent revenue stream that you can show to them that you can pledge payment of those kinds of things. Great example, and Christina was neck deep in this. One of the reasons why our roads are in such bad condition, and one of the reasons why the infrastructure in this community is not where it needs to be, is certainly in the city of Tampa, we don't have the ability to do big projects absent bonding, and you need that revenue stream to bond. Had that transportation tax passed, well, it did pass. It did pass.
Yeah.
We just got robbed in the courts. That would have given us a consistent 30-year revenue stream that we could have gone out and bonded to do a lot of the things that we all know this city needs: road repair, infrastructure repair, extending the trolley. We have a federal match for the trolley extension. We have a state match for the trolley extension. We can't find the local match that allows us to get all of that other money to be able to extend the trolley.
Other than like a additional gas tax.
Other than, well, we don't have it to pay as you go, and gas tax is declining because of all those electric cars you sell. And it, yeah.
And I do have plenty available.
So, all of our revenue streams are declining, which makes it more and more difficult as costs go up for paving and concrete and asphalt. But that's why that gas tax that was so important. It wasn't a gas tax, it was sales tax. All for transportation was so important to this community. And the decision by those judges and that little cabal behind it, I'm telling you guys, will set us back a generation if we don't find something to replace it.
Bob, quick
Yeah.
question. Can you talk a little about the CRA
Yeah.
and how those funds are allocated?
Yep.
And maybe add a little bit, I know in the last few weeks, the mayor is trying to allocate some of those funds to some of these projects.
Yep.
Could you
Yeah, absolutely.
talk if you're for that, against? I'm just curious. I know this isn't a political.
No.
I'm just curious. So.
I'm a big believer in CRAs. CRAs are what's referred to community redevelopment agencies, and they're tied to a district, a specific district that has been designed. And there are about 8 of them in the city. There's one in downtown, Ybor, there's one in East Tampa, Drew Park. And I'll just use the downtown one as an example because that's the best example. 30 years ago, when that was established, they set the baseline ad valorem number at what it was in 1970. All of the incremental increase over the last 25 years above that baseline stays and is collected and has to be spent within that district. So all of the increase in valuation in downtown Tampa, for example, once you take out the baseline revenue, all of that increase remains in the downtown area to be used for projects within the downtown area that hopefully will generate more property tax that will replenish the CRAs. For example, Water Street. Amazing project. The city committed an amount of money along with the county for Jeff's project. It has to be spent on public-facing projects, infrastructure, sidewalks, water, sewer. Obviously, it helps the developer, and the developer can spend their money on other things. That investment that we made in Water Street over the 30 years of that CRA will return revenues tenfold to the CRA based on the success of that project. So the idea is you keep it replenishing each other and you go out and spend it on, you seed something else. You seed something else and then private capital comes in. We're here to assist, we're here to help. They throw up a big building, that building throws off, $1 million a year in property tax revenues, it goes back into the fund, so then we can go seed money somewhere else. It makes all the sense in the world and it works. There are some who are trying to cap it and spend that money on other places in the city, and I understand, why they would make that argument, but you lose a valuable tool without having that CRA there. And a lot of people don't, they look around and they say, how could a mayor ask for a property tax increase when you have all these new buildings throwing off all this property tax revenue? Why would we need a property tax increase? Well, you can't spend that money that is generated in those CRAs anywhere else by law. So I can't take all that downtown money that Jeff is generating and that we're all so proud of and spend it in East Tampa. So that's why discussions like this are so important, because most people say, God damn, I see all this building going on. Why are we raising property taxes? Go spend that money somewhere else in East Tampa or West Tampa. You can't. You just can't. So a lot of folks are confused about that particular topic. Salaries. We have 3 unions. We have the police union, fire union, and we have general employees union. They make up the vast majority of city employees. They generally negotiate contracts in 3-year increments. I think I had 3 rounds of negotiations with each of them. Obviously, during the recession, I wasn't able to do a lot for them. The most I was able to give them was 3.5%. which was way more than most cities around the country who were closing fire stations, firing cops, not replacing cops that were retired. We didn't do any of that. We kept our hiring up. We paid them what we could with what I had. This last contract that they got, it's a 3-year deal, but you see these numbers here? It's like 9.5, 9.5, 9.5 for each union. Then I think it drops to like 3.5 and then 3 in the 3rd year. That adds up. Now, none of us would want the jobs that those folks have. They deserve the pay that they get because they do a dangerous job in a dangerous world for us. We want to take care of them. We want to make sure that their pensions are good, that they earn a good living, that they want to come to Tampa to work. We are lucky that we get the best of the best in Tampa Police and Tampa Fire. It's a dangerous job. And if any of you have had the opportunity to go on a ride along with any of our cops, not in South Tampa. You don't have to ride around Casey's house. Go ride in East Tampa on midnights, and I swear to God, you'll be petrified. It is a dangerous job. The guns out there on the street and the people that are willing to use them, you would be astounded. So I'm not begrudging them anything that they're able to get because they do what we are incapable or unwilling to do for ourselves, and we should be thankful for them and they should be paid accordingly. But there is a number associated with this. And so, again, people cost money. These are, you heard me say we're self-insured. So these are the annual nationwide healthcare costs average. We've been able to keep it down here, largely because we set up 3 clinics of our own to treat our own employees. And so we've worked really hard to keep our healthcare costs down. This is going from 11 all the way to 22. You can see how the blue line has taken off, as we all know in your businesses. You're doing the same thing and having to deal with the same thing. But the city's been really successful at keeping the rate of increase to a much lesser degree than most jurisdictions. All right, these are just kind of major expenditures. Well, here we go. Pay increases, salary. People cost money in local government. That's where you're going to get a significant amount of the demand for new budgets. You can see all the other things that we end up funding. So, in conclusion, you should be proud of your city. It's a well-run city. We can obviously have differences in terms of, the appropriate amount of taxation. The needs are clearly there. It's how you get there that is up for discussion, and we all witnessed that this last couple of weeks during the most recent budget discussions. But the city is in a good place, particularly given what we have come through. This city is really poised on the verge of something really special, and we all should be really proud that our kids are coming home and they're bringing all their kids with them. And this has become the place in America where the best and the brightest want to come. We see it. I mean, Joe, those kids from Berkeley that you send off to colleges, they're coming home now. They're bringing their friends with them. This place is on fire. We collectively have got to make sure that we maintain that momentum, that we elect people who are focused on that, not elect people who are focused on destroying or dividing or demonizing other people, that we realize as a community that we didn't get here by happenstance. This took a lot of work on the part of all of us. And if we don't get up every day to compete, if we don't get up every day recognizing that there are 10 cities coming behind us, just like we did to Charlotte, North Carolina, if we don't get up every day and put that eye black on and be ready to go out there and fight for this community and compete for jobs and for talent and for corporate relocations, somebody is going to come up behind us and steal our thunder. I used to keep this thing on my desk that I stole from the Navy SEALs. It said the only easy day was yesterday. And that is so true. So don't let anybody tell you that we can rest on our laurels, that this all of a sudden descended on us and we didn't have to work. We worked damn hard to get this city to where it is now. Don't ever let anybody divide us, whether it's by partisan politics or by race or by ethnicity. Don't do it. And elect people that are focused on what's good about this community and that are driven to make this the place that our kids are going to want to stay and our grandkids are going to want to stay. We are this far from realizing those aspirations that all of us have for this community. And your generation, Andrew, and many of you that are a little bit younger than I am, this is going to be your turn soon. This is going to be your city soon. Let's go get this done. Let's not ever take our foot off the gas pedal. And those that would divide us, tell them, no, not in our town, not now, not ever, go somewhere else. And that election for mayor 4 years from now is going to be critical. Critical. So you all need to be in the game and be in the game in a big way to make sure that that history of good mayors that we've been lucky to have for 50 years now continues. All right? Can't do it without you. Let's go get it done.
Great. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
My homemade slides, I don't have a staff anymore, so I'm like cutting and pasting and calling my 17-year-old, honey, how do you do a PowerPoint?
So I got a couple questions for you, and feel free, I want to kind of keep the conversation going, but chime in. This isn't a scheduled thing, but right off the bat, I think one of the things I was thinking about was similar to what kind of Scott was talking about. You have all this operation that goes on, but everyday pipes get bad, roads get bad, the maintenance of the city, the physical pace of it. Where does that come from?
A number of different sources. We basically have a city of 100-year-old pipes, cast iron pipes. We're not unique in this country. That's the infrastructure that most cities have. And so maintaining that or replacing it is an ongoing daily problem. I mean, and this may not be an accurate number, but there could be as many as 40 water main breaks every day in the city of Tampa. They're just old pipes. And so, you got to stay on them. The road conditions and the potholes, let alone expansion, it's a daily struggle. And we don't have the ability to put together a long-term plan to both maintain it and or expand it and improve it because we just don't have the revenue stream. That's where that offer transportation tax was so important. We would have had then that 30-year tranche of money that we could have done a lot of these things that we all wish we would do. I mean, I hit those same potholes every day.
Yeah. Well,
Just one follow-up to, you mentioned, Bob, the gas tax revenue because of proliferation of EVs.
Better gas mileage,
Right. So, I think there's a proposal in Congress. I mean, most people forget how much revenue is generated at the tax pump, at the gas pump, right? So there's going to have to be a federal number, there's going to have to be a state number, and there's going to have to be a local number for EVs, right? Probably when vehicles are registered. You think those conversations are being had?
Yes, I do. And I think we'll get to that point. I mean, EVs use the roads just like any other vehicle. They ought to pay for their share of the maintenance and improvement of it. And so you don't want to discourage EVs because, I mean, that's a clean industry that is growing. It should grow, but they need to bear their fair share of the burden.
so what about outside funding sources like state and federal dollars? I got to think that would be.
It can be, and certainly in the last 4 years, and this is not a political statement, so don't. The Biden administration with Biden dollars and all that happened during COVID and Build Back America have been very good for local jurisdictions. There's been a lot more money available than there was in the Obama administration and the Trump administration for different reasons, obviously. Infrastructure has been a big priority for this administration, and so they're pumping a lot of money into roads, bridges that are literally falling down around the country. And so the opportunity, and if I had a chart, it would show that the number of federal grants that the city has gotten over the last 4 years vastly surpasses what I was able to get and what Iorio was able to get just because it's available. And they're pushing the money out to the states and the cities. That's a good thing. That's our money. That's our money. Florida's been a donor state for a long time. It's about time we started to get some of our money back. The Biden administration has been really good for mayors, local governments, and state governments.
Andrew, can I ask a question? Do you agree with the most recent, efforts or discussions by council and what they voted on, or what's your position on that?
On you mean the budget?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, the proposal to increase it a mil was probably too much, too quick, with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of other issues that people are facing in their daily lives. And so they may have overreached a little bit. That's not to say that the needs aren't there, because they are. It's not to say that if they had gotten the money that it would not have been placed in the appropriate places, because I think it would have been. But I think in hindsight, had they scaled it back a little bit, they might have been able to get it. I think turning the budget over to city council and asking them to do the budgeting is a colossal disaster, which I think is exactly what it turned out to be.
Would you have recommended something else or an alternative?
It happened to me in 2018. We went to the council with a potential millage increase. They started to scale it back, but we never lost control of the budget process. So we went back to them with an alternative plan that ended up passing. But once you turn it over to council and all of the pressure they get from all of the activists that show up every day, it's not going to end up pretty. We're throwing money at affordable housing with no plan. The need is there, but you just can't throw money at an affordable housing problem. I mean, you can't go out and just buy hotels and think you're going to house the homeless without any forethought, without any business plan, without any recognition of what you're getting into. And so, I think they're reacting to the loudest voices without a lot of forethought as to how you're going to deploy that money in the most efficient way.
How do you take an area like South Tampa that's not in a CRA and try to increase revenue back to the city to make the sidewalk improvements, to do the roadways, all the things, at least I complain about a lot, but what would be your opinion on that? There are some who are talking about capping the CRA and taking some of that money and deploying it elsewhere in the city. That's certainly an option. I don't know that that's the preferred option, and I don't think it's being done for altruistic reasons. It's, you in the current budget, when so much of it is getting eaten up by personnel costs, it doesn't leave you a lot of flexibility to go out and do some of the other things. So, you always start with the people and figure out what you can afford and how you can do the job, and then try and keep that low so you have more money to go out and do other things, and you go out and encourage development because that's going to produce more revenues for you. When in the midst of that recession, I told everybody who would listen, I can't cut my way out of this recession. We've cut the city down to bare bones. It can't work. The only way we're going to get out of this recession is to grow our way out of the recession. That's why we blew up the permitting process back in 2011, to give people a reason to come to the city and do business and get things moving and get things building and get things out of the ground, because that's how I was going to get revenue. So, yes, Scott.
Bob, you mentioned early on that water, sewer, they're tasked to operate in the black.
Yes.
Right? Well, what does that mean?
That means that their rates should cover what their costs are. They have the ability, because they have dedicated revenue streams in terms of what you pay for water and sewer, that they can go out and issue debt to build more lines or improve facilities or treatment plants, but they've always got to cover their costs. So their rates are directly tied to what it takes to run their business.
But that would be a balanced budget.
Balance plus reserves. I mean, they have pretty healthy reserves. Yeah, which they need to. Yeah.
So, a lot of great information on the enterprise fund versus the general fund. Kind of highlights, outside of public safety. If you care about parks, you care about art. Not a whole lot left there to do it. So, how can you, to the extent you find things that you're passionate about, what's the best way for us to, kind of get involved with that?
I mean, you can get involved as private citizens. There's committees that are associated with, like Parks and Recreation, with the arts, that rely on private donations and private involvement largely.
Those committees are part of mayor's office, city council?
Some both, yeah. I mean, the mayor obviously appoints most of the people to the most important committees, and then city council has their appointments as well. But obviously the arts are a big part of who we are as a community, and it's not all about brick and mortar. It's about public art. It's about public spaces. It's about public festivals. I saw one of the things city council did was, and I took this personally, said they were going to get rid of the Irish festival, the greening of the river. Well, they want to piss some people off. Wait till I send the Irish Mafia after that fool. The fireworks display on the 4th of July. I mean, that's petty kind of stuff. In the scheme of things, that's not going to balance your budget. That's just petty. So yeah, those kinds of things are important for our community. I mean, it's the use of our public parks. That's everybody's front door. And so the more that we can program that, the more that we can activate it, the more that brings people downtown to the urban core. That's the reason we did Julian B. Lane across the river, which over time will turn out to be the equivalent of Tampa's Central Park. Because I knew if we did that, then it would lead to the restoration of West Tampa as we know it, all the way to Howard and Armenia, up to Columbus Drive, south to Kennedy Boulevard. There have been hundreds of millions of dollars invested in North Hyde Park and West Tampa as a result of the completion and construction of Julian B. Lane Park. Because that was, again, one of those projects where you seed it with government money and then step aside and let the private sector go do what they're going to do. And it's transformed that neighborhood from the demolition of the public housing to what we see there on West River to what we're about to see on Rome Yard. That was largely triggered by Julian B. Lane Park, and that was not inexpensive. That was close to $35 million. $20 million of that was money I took from the BP settlement that we got and plowed it into that park. And then remaining $15 million was from CIT dollars. But I knew what was going to happen, and that's exactly what's happened. I mean, it's become the go-to park in our system now and led to the expansion of the west side of the Hillsborough River, which we all, desperately want. Yeah. Yeah. Rico.
To your point of affordable housing, not just throwing money at something without having a solution for it, how would you address or incentivize development for workforce housing?
We've got a big problem, as we all know, because we have been reading a lot about it over the last year in terms of availability for workforce housing. We can't be a complete city if the workers that run our city, whether it's the servers and the cooks that work at Bob Basham's restaurants or the waiters in the hotels downtown, if they have to live 40 miles away, they're not coming to work downtown with gas prices being what they are. So we've got to create a community where every segment of the community has an opportunity to live, work, and play. Affordable housing, workforce housing is a critical part of that. The land prices in Tampa have gotten so high that it's driving out a lot of people that used to live here that were of lesser means, but they are the backbone of the economy. And so we've got to make sure that those folks have an opportunity as well if we're going to be successful. There are ways to incentivize developers that don't involve just throwing cash at them. You can do density bonuses. You can do, if the city has land, you can put the land in the deal and let the developers build the building. There's all kinds of creative ways that you can be helpful to build that product that we're lacking right now, that are appropriate, that will give you a return on investment, and it's not just pushing money out the door and hoping that it does good, which is what a lot of governments are doing all over the country because the need is so desperate. But we've got to have that mix. I mean, everything in downtown can't look like Water Street or Bayshore. And we need that mix of people to allow our economy to prosper, to allow the urban core to grow, because those are many of the folks that literally are the backbone of that economy. The same is true with transportation. I mean, we need a bus system that actually works to get people from where they live to where they're employed. Without that, you're not going to have the workforce that's going to allow us to succeed. So none of us may ride a Heartline bus, but the people that we employ and the people that we need to be successful in our businesses, many of them do. And they need a safe, reliable means of transportation to get from where they live to the employment centers, whether it's West Shore or whether it's downtown or whether it's USF. We got to have it.
And I think the last thing we need is the abolishment or the dissolval of HART. We don't have a solution to replace it.
Hart's in a troubled place. And a lot of it is lack of revenue. A lot of it is bad management, as we've all read about. We need Hart to be successful. We need a transportation system that is not just riders of necessity, but also riders of choice. And without that, we're going to struggle, because not everybody can afford a car. Not everybody can pay $4 a gallon in gasoline. Not everybody can live in close proximity to the places where they work. So we got to have a transportation system that allows them to get to where they need to go. It's an economic issue. It's not a social issue. We got to have a system that makes sense and that works and that's reasonable and reliable.
You mentioned the importance of the election that's coming up in 4 years and how much, really the power of that mayor of Tampa has. Were you surprised at all that in a city this large and diverse, that the last election ran unopposed? I'm just curious about your, not making a judgment. Just curious what you thought. I was a little surprised.
It's tough to beat an incumbent mayor. An incumbent mayor has a lot of power and a lot of ability to move people and things. So I'm not surprised. And historically, we haven't had a lot of real challengers to incumbent mayors. I mean, in 2015, I had a write-in candidate. Dick Greco had a write-in at his second term. Iorio had basically a write-in. So it's hard to beat an incumbent mayor. The turnout was not what I expected, and the drop-off in particular was greater than I was expecting. Drop-off being those that didn't vote in the mayor's race but voted in the races below it. So either they were not interested in the mayor's race or whatever, they thought she was going to win. So it's hard to beat an incumbent mayor. You got to screw up pretty bad. Yeah.
But you also mentioned the importance of the election in 4 years.
Yeah.
Is that a potential term 3 for you, perhaps? I'm not a reporter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but there's a camera there.
Yeah, we'll save that for another time.
No, I'll answer it, Andrew. Because I get asked like 100 times a day, and I'm honored. And
You seem very mayoral to me.
well, thank you.
It's a legit question.
Yeah. When I left in 2019, I had no plans to come back. It was the only job I ever wanted. It was a job I loved going to work every day. It was a job that turned my hair white. It was a job that I had aspired for and trained for, as many of you know, through all the ups and downs and victories and defeats for a long time. And when I tell you I loved going to work every day, I loved going to work every day. I could not wait to get to the office. And I hope it showed, because the city will take on the personality of the mayor if you do it right. So I wasn't planning on coming back. I went out the top of my game. I figured I was done, turned it over to Jane. But I'm fearful of whom follows Jane, as I think we all should be. And whether it's me or one of you or anybody else, we cannot let the success that we've enjoyed and the progress that we've made be destroyed. We just can't do it. We've come too far, and all of us have worked way too hard to make this happen. So the answer is, I'll see. My hair can't get any whiter. We'll see. It's yeah, there's that too. There's that too.
So I have a question back on the budget. You know, many people run businesses, and you know, one of the things I fight all the time is inefficiencies and waste. I'm looking at that shrimp that no one's going to eat probably, and thinking, you know, it's got waste, which is fine. You know, $1.9 million budget. There's a lot going on there. It would be foolish to say there's not waste within it. I don't think you could ever stomp it all out. No. What, you know, around kind of transparency, or, you know, what can the mayor do to, you know, what's your experience in trying to do as best you can with a difficult issue?
Yeah, it's let's go to the waste issue. You know, you hear this a lot in campaigns about waste, fraud, and abuse. I would submit to you that there's some. You know, with 45, now 4,900 employees, there's going to be some. There's inefficiencies because government is rarely on the cutting edge of technology and deploying technology to what they do. Some of it is because we're not profit driven. So there's less of an incentive, although we are one of the biggest customer service businesses in the country, and we ought to be as efficient as Walmart or as Amazon. But we're not. There's not that incentive, that profit incentive to get better every day. So you're going to get less of that. For the most part, there's not a lot of waste in the city, and certainly during the recession, we couldn't afford it. I mean, I sold every piece of property that the city had that was a non-performing asset just to get it off our books because we were having to maintain it, we were having to cut the grass on it, keep the air conditioning on. I sold it. I got rid of it all because I couldn't afford to keep it. And so we were going through and looking at everything that the city did and finding ways to either shed it, do it better, or, you know, just sell it. So the city was pretty lean and mean because we had to be. The problem with government is that in good times, it's inevitable that the creep occurs because most folks who work in government are well-intentioned, wanting to use government as a tool for good. That's sort of their nature. That's their DNA. So with that comes more programs, more people, more costs, all in an effort to do good things for people. But at some point, you just got to figure out what is the baseline fundamental things that government ought to do, and we ought to do them well. And let's not venture into some of these other things that happen when there's plenty of tax money around and involved. You just got to stay focused on what your core mission is and what your core function is, and try not to get sucked in to some of these other things like housing. We are not housing developers. The need is there. We can be helpful, but city government is not a developer by trade. And so we shouldn't get into businesses like that we have no understanding of what the outcome should be, like private sector folks do. So yeah, I mean, you just got to stay vigilant to the inevitable growth and creep of government into places that, not in a malicious way, but they just don't need to be. Let the private sector do it.
So last question I would have is kind of around interest rates. You know, all businesses are dealing with rising interest rates and how it's impacting operations and spends. You know, how does rising interest rates impact the city government?
Cost of borrowing money's more expensive. That's where those bond ratings are so important, because we're able to keep our costs down because Wall Street perceives us as being a very well-run conservative city, fiscally conservative. So yeah, I mean, the same things that you all deal with, we deal with too when we're purchasing, whether it's supply chain issues, whether it's concrete, whether it's availability of labor, whether it's contractors who are experiencing those things, passing that cost on to us that we now have to pay. The current administration has some big projects that are ongoing that the cost has ballooned for some of the same reasons that those of you that build buildings are experiencing as well. So it's, yeah, everything that you experience, we experience. Now, we can issue, you know, debt at a lower rate than perhaps you can, but, you know, we're affected by the same changes and the same cost. Yeah. Labor, you know, everything you struggle with, we struggle with.
Try to do more with the same.
You try.
Any other questions anyone would have for?
Yes, sir, Nick.
Thank you. By the way, great to hear all the positive stuff. That really makes you feel good about being in Tampa.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Something I always wondered, do you think, traveling all around the country, do you think, and obviously having done this and lived this world, the fact that Florida's probably one of the last states that's not extreme in politics, I mean, if you look at a federal level, it's usually a swing state for a reason. It's, very, very 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a benefit that helps lead to less extreme politicians running and maybe compromising more? Because I see at a state level, something that I'm very proud of our state when I talk to my friends in other states that are either far left or far right. I feel like you all work together, not everyone, but as a whole, better. And I think that's something at the city council level needs to be much better. If you watch city council meetings, it's like Florida State's playing. And
It's ridiculous.
But at the state level, I feel like, But do you see that as a benefit? I mean, I know it's sometimes tougher because you can't just do everything the way you want it. But do you think that's a benefit?
You know, Nick, I think we are a purple state by and large. I think as of late, as some in our state have ventured down this path of cultural issues, it's become a little more problematic. But I'll give you an example. When Governor Scott was the governor for the 8 years, which was pretty much the same time I was the mayor, he and I obviously, philosophically probably poles apart on some issues. But when it came to what was good for Florida and for Tampa and for job creation and economic development, I couldn't have asked for a better partner. And I worked hand in glove with him for 8 years. And in return, he was very, very good to Tampa. I saw Will Weatherford's name was on the list, and if Will was here, I would say the very same thing. I mean, Will was Speaker of the House when I was the mayor, and I couldn't have had a better partner there. I mean, obviously, I'm a Democrat. He's a Republican, but there's no Democrat or Republican way to fix a pothole. I mean, you just go do it. And it's time to put that bullshit aside because it's not serving our country well, obviously. The more it creeps into our state level politics and then descends down to the local level, we become more and more dysfunctional over issues that don't really matter. So it can happen. It's inures to the benefit of you, the citizens, if you have elected officials that can believe in that common ground and stop worrying about who's a D or who's an R. We'd all be a lot better off because we all have the same hopes. We all have the same aspirations. This is a state that's a little center right or a little center left. It's not this, which seems to be the people that we nominate on both sides. We're not. We're like just a little bit either way. And the problems, there are solutions to these problems if you're willing to work across, the lines to do it. But it seems like certainly in DC and increasingly in Tallahassee, that's not happening. It's just not happening. And so that's why mayors should run the damn world.
Well, that's like a commercial for Ford Tampa Bay right there.
Because we don't care. We don't have the luxury of caring. Our job's to build a city. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican.
On a federal level, I think it's been disappointing, but the point of pride is Floridian.
Yeah. I think, now we've, as a state, we are known as a place that's open for business, that's good to do business, that historically, there's been some aberrations as of late, that it didn't matter where you came from or how you got here, what matters is that you were interested in the good of the community. That's the way it should be. If you want to be a drag queen, I couldn't care less. You can go dress up all you want, Nick. I'm fine with that. That's your, yeah. That's you got that hair going, so Disney is not a threat to my existence. So it's, let's put all that stuff aside. And let's focus on moving this state in the right direction. Yes.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Several years ago, they were talking about a mobility plan, transportation plan, you want to call it, to connect the airport to downtown, to USF, and a connector. And there was a bunch of people kind of spearing that a few years ago. Whatever happened to that? I'm just curious. I know they were trying to raise some funds. They even talked about, was it Brightline out of Miami? I read last week, I think, that they connected to Orlando. I mean, I think we're way off.
Yeah.
And, if we want to be a big city, we have to figure out transportation and mobility. We talked about earlier.
By the way, our next speaker is on transportation.
Good. Who is it? Who's coming?
Well, we haven't confirmed it
Okay.
yet. So. We got plan A, plan B.
But my question really is again, if you were mayor or not, trying to connect the federal government, the state level, and the local government to be able to connect everybody together, you know, and be able to connect. I travel a lot as well. I think Nick or somebody mentioned earlier, and it's great to be able to go, if it's in the U.S. or overseas, and get on a train or get on mass transit at any level. And unfortunately, Tampa doesn't have it. I mean, people still drive. People rely, maybe not on Heartline. So I'm just curious your opinion on that.
All for transportation, bro.
Yep. Transportation and the lack thereof will be our Achilles heel as a community if we don't fix it. It will be the goose that kills the golden egg as we know it. And it's got to be mobility options. It's not just cars. It's a bus system that works and that's reliable. It's mass transit, light rail in the city. Riverview may not want it. It may not be appropriate for Eastern Hillsborough County, but I can tell you in the urban core, the ability to move people so that they don't have to get into their cars is going to be absolutely critical. Brightline is coming. Brightline just cut the ribbon on their Miami to Orlando station. The next leg of that is Orlando to Tampa. The problem is when they drop off all of those people, they're going to be standing there with their suitcases and no ability to either get to the airport, get to the beaches, get to downtown, depending on where the terminus is, get to St. Pete, unless they're going to get on one of their scooters. And so we've got to find a way to connect all these things, and you're absolutely right. That's why that dedicated revenue source, you can't do any of those things unless you have a 30-year revenue stream that you can bond and issue debt to get it started and completed.
How do we get that done? How do we fund a plan to get that done?
We had it until it was overturned. That's what all for transportation was.
Get it back on the ballot and pass it.
We got to get it back on the ballot. The problem is the current makeup of this county commission is not likely to do that. Again, the people we elect matter because the previous county commission would have put it on the ballot again. I'm sure Christina would have been running it. It probably would have passed like it did the first time. But the current makeup of this county commission is not going to do that, which is going to delay this at least another, just to get it on the ballot, 2 to 4 years.
Just one
Last
more-
question.
Yeah, so one more follow-up on the budget. You mentioned, and we're all aware of a 3% cap on property tax, right? And maybe when that was put in place 40 years ago, with inflation stable at 2%, that's a win. But with inflation escalating, right, and experts saying, hey, the new 2% is 4%, and then every year you're just underwater more, right? So is there a way, I mean, I'm not proposing more property taxes.
Yeah, let's wait and see how
Scott, first of all, it's in the Florida Constitution, so it's going to be really difficult to overturn it. It was called the Save Our Homes Act. It was done purely for political reasons by somebody who was running for governor at the time. The end result, it strangles local government because we're so dependent upon ad valorem property tax. I mean, it literally, when you heard me say it took me a decade to get back to 2007 revenues, that was true because it plummeted. We all loved it. You know, you had to claw back each, but yet the cost of running the government was still increasing. And so, yeah, there's got to be a fair way to do it that recognizes the increase and appreciation in the value and allows people to pay the proper share of what it takes to run government.
Great. Well, I want to first thank Mayor for coming to speak to us. It really was beneficial. Appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for support for Tampa Bay, and we'll see you soon.